So here's the next step in this argument about religion and cooperation in large groups. If it is the case that thoughts of a supernatural watcher facilitate cooperation in anonymous situations, then it makes sense that people then could use indications of religious devotion as a signal for trust, right? If I believe in the same supernatural watcher that you believe in, then I can be more confident that I can trust you and then we can reciprocate, even though we might not have a lot of familiarity with each other. Is that true? Two economists, Jonathan Tan and Claudia Vogel, tested this idea in the trust game, in another economic game where we can actually, we don't have to ask people, do you trust someone? We can actually measure trust with dollar amounts. So what they did is, they had people play the trust game, and people were either religious or non-religious, and they were playing with either religious or non-religious people. Here's how it works very quickly. You're either the proposer or the responder. There are two people in this game. The proposer has $10. Then the proposer has to make a decision how much money to transfer to the responder. If the proposer transfers whatever amount, that amount gets tripled by the experimenter. And then the responder has the option of now returning the favor. So if the responder then returns the favor, and the fair thing would be to split it in half and give the half back to the proposer, then everybody benefits, right? Now all of a sudden, instead of having just $10, you have $15. The problem, of course, is that how can you trust that the responder will actually be fair? Right? So it's a nice measure of just pure trust in anonymous situations. And again, it's interesting because there are individual variability and cultural variability for interesting reasons of how much people trust in this situation. So in the absence of any other information, when these researchers gave information on religiosity, did that make a difference? And the answer is yes. Excuse me. What you see in this graph is the numbers on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, refer to the religiosity level of the respondent. Okay, and the bars refer to how much money was transferred to the other respondent. Is the colors the same? Yeah. So the dark red bar is the people who were highly religious. The blue bars are people who are low on religiosity, and the yellow bars are total. For the time being, for a second, just ignore the blue and red, look at just the yellow. And what you find is that, on average, everyone was trusting religious people more, right? The greater the number, as you go to number 5. Number 5 was, so I'm playing with someone who is highly religious. And when that happens, I really trust this person. If the person is not religious at all, I don't trust this person at all. It's just a linear curve. You also find that religious people are even more likely to do this, but even non-religious people tend to be, it seems like they're trusting religious people in this experiment at least. So this is very interesting because, again, it's evidence that not only thoughts of God promote, or supernatural watchers promote cooperation, but that then people then use that information to decide who they should trust. This leads me to an interesting, another quick digression about the psychology of prejudice against atheists. I think what I just showed you explains why atheists are the target of prejudice in religious societies in particular. If you will, freethinkers are considered free riders in the eyes of religious people. So this is widespread, but just to give you one example, when George W. Bush, the elder Bush, was running for president, Rob Sherman, who's an atheist American, at one point confronted him and said, "Surely you recognize the equal citizenship and patriotism of Americans who are atheists?" And George W. Bush said, "No, I don't know that atheists should be considered as citizens, nor should they be considered patriots. This is one nation under God." So what's going on? Well, if you look at surveys, this is a survey of Americans, representative survey of Americans. If you look at prejudice over time, and you can ask, sociologists ask questions about prejudice in a number of ways. This one is, the question is, would you be willing to vote for a president of your own preferred party if this person was Catholic, Jewish, African American, atheist, homosexual, etc. And what you find is that for a vast majority of groups, you have tremendous increases in acceptance. So by even though you start from a low point in 1958, by 1999, Catholics, Jewish, African Americans, women, I don't have women in this graph, but it's the same. Overwhelming number of Americans say, yes, I'll vote for these people, it doesn't matter. The only exception is atheists, who there's been a little bit of acceptance, but then it has flattened out. And in this survey, in this major survey, atheists were the only group that could not garner a majority. Now, this is puzzling if you think about the fact that atheists are not a cohesive group. They're not that powerful. They're not threatening to anyone. So all the standard explanations for why people have prejudices about other groups do not work for atheists. And I think the reason for that is because unlike other kinds of prejudices, like ethnic or racial, prejudice against atheists is driven by moral distrust. If that's true, then we should expect two things. One is that this kind of prejudice should be specific to trust situations. It should be context-specific to trust situations, and it should be driven by belief in God. The more you believe in God, the more you should subscribe to this kind of belief. So in an experiment with my graduate students, we had people choose candidates for jobs in a mock interview situation. And some of the jobs required high trust, like babysitter. Other jobs required low trust, like line cook. And then we had people, and then we gave information, various kinds of information to people. Some of them was that this person doesn't believe in God, or this person believes in God. And then here's what we found. We found that exactly what we expected. Oops, excuse me. This is belief in God of the participants. The more you believe in God, the more you discriminate against atheists, but only for high trust jobs. For low trust jobs, there's no effect at all. So this is a very specific kind of prejudice. It's really driven by trust. Okay, so far, the argument is that belief in supernatural watchers induces cooperation in anonymous situations. Indication of religious devotion to the same supernatural watcher can induce trust. Then the next question would be, does this mean that religious groups are more cooperative, right? Because they should be more able to reduce free rider problems. They should be better at social monitoring, since someone is monitoring, even if no one is monitoring. Is that really true? And this should be especially true in situations where times are tough, when the group is facing difficult conditions. The anthropologist Rich Sosis did a lovely experiment, not an experiment, but a study of 19th century utopian communities in America to test this idea. So there were two waves of utopian communities in the history of American culture. One was the 60s, but the previous one was late 19th century, of course. And conveniently for us, many of these communities were religious and many were socialist. So we can compare their survival rates over time, over the last 100 years. And when you do that, you get this really massive effect. On average, for every year that Sosis looked at, religious communes that were categorized as religious were 4 times more likely to survive, to make it to the next year, than secular communes. And this is controlling for a number of things that we should control for. So here is some evidence that there's a reason why, or that the cooperative benefits of religion are translating into longevity of groups. Important here to notice that this is a cultural evolution argument. It's not a genetic evolution argument. It's not as if there's no changes in gene frequencies in these groups. It's just purely cultural. You get these beliefs from your community, and then these beliefs have an effect on cooperation rates, which then change the longevity of the group. Now, those of you in the audience who know game theory are probably thinking about this big problem in the argument that I have presented so far. The problem is that if what I'm saying is true, then why wouldn't anyone who doesn't really truly believe invade a group, a cooperative group like this, like the religious communes in the study, receive benefits but not reciprocate, right? So far, what I'm describing is nice cooperative groups where everybody can benefit, where trust levels are high, etc. But then, how are these groups going to prevent free riders from faking religious belief, entering the group, getting benefit, but not reciprocating? This is a perennial problem of cooperative groups, as I'm sure many of you recognize. And this problem also has been recognized by evolutionary researchers, and the possible answer that has been proposed is costly religious behaviors.